Well, hi everybody. So we're going to go have a look today at A2A Simulations Comanche. Now this thing is fairly detailed. It's a very nice plane to go fly. I really like how it feels in the air and all the rest of those things. I'm probably going to repeat that quite a bit throughout this review, but either way, we're going to go ahead and have a look at the cockpit. We'll look at the tablet. We'll start the thing up. We'll go flying around. Now this thing does come with an engine damage system or sort of a general wear and tear system, and I've gone ahead and set it up so that hopefully we experience a failure while I'm flying it around, but we'll see what happens. Either way, probably not going to cover everything in this one because I'm trying to keep it under about 20 minutes. So we'll go ahead and just kind of get started here, and then at the end we'll do a, like a 5 or 6 minute review on it or something like that. Alrighty, well here we are in the Comanche. Now as far as how everything looks in here, it looks really good. Model and texture quality are nice and smooth, and textures came out real nice and everything like that. There's a little bit of wear and tear kind of around the cockpit and everything. There's a little bit of customization. I'm not going to say there's a lot, but you can, move the vents around, change the angle of the spotlight and remove that life preserver if you want. Things like that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through what you can click on in the cockpit here, but for the most part, everything in here is kind of clickable. So do have a look around. There's a fair amount of detail on it. Alrighty, well, we're going to go ahead and run through the tablet here. So over on the left side of the cockpit, we can go ahead and click on it and bring it up here. Now this thing is fairly customizable and wherever you can place it around the cockpit, so we just kind of need to go ahead and click on the outside of the frame here. We can kind of move it around. There are some limitations to it, but for the most part you can place it anywhere. We're coming here to flight info. As far as what's in here, just some weather information, aircraft information, checklists, things like that. Move over to controls. We have a couple different options for our GPS unit. As far as miscellaneous down here, we can go ahead and remove the chocks, tie downs. As far as electrical and lights, there are a number of things in the cockpit that we can go ahead and turn on and off from inside here in the tablet, and that's kind of what this place is. The T right here is going to be the tow bar. Now I'm going to go over that kind of last. I did think it was a neat option though. We're going to kind of skip down here to options, and we're going to go through cockpit persistence. Now cockpit persistence just saves the state between flights. So let's say you've exited the flight and you left the battery on or something like that. It's going to be on the next time you start the plane up. As far as persistence by livery, this kind of just individualizes the liveries themselves so that you can kind of configure them in different ways to specific liveries. As far as advanced options, we have wear rate and failure rate. This plane does have a sort of general wear and tear system on it and all those things. If we want to turn that off, you just need to click on off here. Now I've set it up to 10 and 100 times because I'm kind of hoping for a failure when we actually do go fly this thing around. Move up here to fuel and payload. The only reason I'm really bringing this one up is because this is where you want to adjust your fuel levels and the weight limits and things like that. You don't want to mess with the weight and balance menu in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Everything needs to be done from in here. It's also where we can add in the passengers and the baggage. As far as maintenance goes, it's where we're going to fix anything that's been damaged on the plane. So we'll come in here. Right now we're on the airframe. We'll go ahead and click inspect, and it'll bring this up. Anything that's green is good, red is bad. So we'll go ahead and click on gear motor here. It'll bring up this message right here. Assuming that it's broken, you just need to click on fix, and it'll go ahead and repair it for you. As far as down here, we've got a couple of different things that we can customize on the exterior of the plane. Now, these things are not just visual. They do affect the plane at least a little bit. So some of them increase drag, decrease drag, that kind of thing. And then we have the propeller down here. We can swap out two separate propellers. One of them is basically metal. The other one's basically wood. Go over here to engine. We have pretty much the same thing as the airframe. We just click inspect, and it'll bring this up. As far as the oil level, we can adjust the oil level, swap out the oil grades, change the spark plugs, clean the spark plugs. Now, overhaul the engine is going to fix everything all at once, and if we click on overhaul all, this will fix the entire plane, period, regardless of what page we're on. So it'll fix the airframe as well, and all the rest of that. Move over here to engine analyzer. This is pretty much a real-time visualization of kind of what your engine's doing currently, and all the rest of that. So we'll look at this a little bit once the engine's actually running. It makes a little bit more sense that way, but that's kind of what it is. Same thing kind of goes for electric system here. The only difference is that we have the breakers down here. So all the breakers are clickable and all those things, they do work. If you want to pull them for whatever reason, you can do it from either in here in the tablet or in the cockpit. Move out here to walk around because I thought this was a really cool feature. So if we go ahead and we click on one of these arrows, it'll take us out here to right now our right flap. We go click it again. We'll go over here to the aileron. We can go ahead and check on a few things here. If we continue to do this, it'll walk us all the way around the plane. If you want to go to a specific point though, you can go ahead and click on it and it'll bring you to that viewpoint. We can go ahead and open things up. Everything does have an animation. It does have a sound. All the rest of that. Some of these things do have two separate click points. So we'll come down here because I thought this one was really neat. We can go ahead and see if there's any water in the fuel. Now this is also available to you if you're looking at it in the engine analyzer, and I'll explain that in a second. I have not run into an instance where I have water in the fuel or anything like that, but I would assume that it's something just because they put it in the manual and all that. So we'll come back in here to controls. We'll go ahead and release the parking brake, and we'll click on the T. That'll bring us out to the front of the plane. We'll go ahead and connect the tow bar for us. Now, if we want to move the plane around, we can pretty much, I guess if you have a yoke or you have a joystick, whatever you have, you can just move that around, and we'll move the plane in the direction that you're going here. And that is pretty much that. So we're going to come back in here to the cockpit. We're going to go ahead and get this thing started and go take it off. Or we're going to go ahead and begin starting this thing up. Before we do, real quick, I wanted to run through something. If, for whatever reason, your battery is really low, we can either fix this in the airframe section, or we can come in here to the electric system. We can just go ahead and click on this plug right here, and it'll go ahead and charge the battery back up for us. But we're going to go ahead and press Control 2, and that'll bring us down here to the fuel selectors. Go ahead and turn these on. Back up here and start flipping everything else on. So we'll start out here with the battery, fuel pump, come over here to the magnetos, turn these on to both. I'm going to put the mixture up to rich, and then we'll come over here, put the propeller pitch up, and then come to the primer. We do need to unlock this, and we do actually need to prime this thing to get it started. So we'll go ahead and at least for me, it seems to be about 4 times, maybe 5. Kind of get this thing going. Might be able to get away with a little bit less than that, but who knows. We'll just come back over here to the engine starter. We'll go ahead and crack the throttle. And we'll just click on this, and it'll go ahead and start the plane up. And there we go. Now it's running. Now, as far as the engine analyzer goes, we can see everything's kind of come to life here. Things have kind of started to change color and a few other things like that. Now, as far as what the colors mean, there's a breakdown of everything in the manual in terms of the different color codes and all that. But it is kind of a neat thing. As far as what we have here, we have these blinking white circles are going to be our spark plugs, so they're firing and everything like that. And if they're a large white circle, it basically means that they are clean, and if they're a smaller circle like this, it means they're kind of getting dirty. But either way, there's a lot of neat little information in here. I thought it was kind of cool as we end up bring the throttle up here. The butterfly is going to open up the carburetor. You know, number of other little things like that. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you do happen to have water in your fuel tank, or in your fuel, well, I guess it's in the tank too. But either way, if you have water in the fuel, it's going to show up here in the fuel filter. It's going to be a little blue bar there. Now, all of this information is kind of contained throughout the instrument panel in terms of gauges and things like that, but it is kind of nice to have it all kind of condensed here, and it's a neat little visualization. Move over here to the electric system. All that we're really worried about here is that our alternator is working, and it is. If you let the RPM get too low, though, it's going to start drawing power back out of the battery instead of running off the alternator. But other than that, that's pretty much all we've got here. So we're going to go ahead and turn on the avionics and some of the lights. No, I technically... Oh, well, there's nobody around, so it doesn't really matter. Either way, we're going to go ahead and head out to the runway and take this thing off. Alrighty. Well, I have attempted to record some kind of a failure in this plane while doing this and have not been able to achieve that yet. So if I don't get it on this try, we're just going to go ahead and land the thing after we take it off. But I have gone ahead and removed all but 2 quarts of oil, so hopefully that'll result in something going wrong here. But we'll go ahead and release the parking brake. Now, as far as taking this thing off, it's a very well-behaved plane on the ground. It's fairly easy to take off. Just need to pull back on the yoke kind of a little bit, let it build up some speed, and it'll pretty much lift itself off the ground. Now, this plane only has about 10 gallons worth of fuel in it, and about, I think it's like a 170-pound passenger, so it'll probably get off the ground here around about 70 miles an hour. Obviously, that's going to change depending on how much weight you have in your plane. But when I have more of a fuel load and some passengers or something like that in here, it does seem to lift off the ground closer to about 90. But either way, it's a very fun plane to go fly. Really kind of like the flight model and all the rest of that stuff. The thing that I really enjoy about this one is kind of the sound set and sort of the visual cues that you get from things on this plane. It's really nice to have them in here by default. But for the most part, the turbulence is probably not going to show up because I decided to do this in live weather, and it's just not very windy out here. Now, as far as the turbulence goes, you can adjust that. There is the ability to kind of customize the severity of the turbulence in the tablet. It's got a little slider bar in there. I think it's in... I don't remember where it is, but it's in there. And then as far as the audio cues go, there's a lot of little audio cues and things like that. Like if we lean the mixture out here too much, the engine's going to start to run real rough and everything. And is that because I leaned it out too much, or did the engine die? Well, the engine died, but I mean, that could happen because I leaned it out too much. All right, well, looks like the engine failed here. So, you know what? That'll be interesting. Let's just see if we can install it here real quick. Really probably should have brushed up on the emergency procedures, but either way, we'll bring it in for a landing here. I guess I may have done that with a mixture. I'm not entirely sure yet, but probably landed that field right there, assuming we can make it over the water. Either way, we got a lot of little things in here. The sun visors are wigging out like crazy. It's the engine. We have no wind. That's amazing. Either way, the sound cues and all the rest of that stuff are real nice in this plane. It's a very fun thing to kind of go fly and all the rest of that stuff, even if it is just kind of a general aviation aircraft and all the rest of that stuff. So it's kind of just a point A to point B thing. Either way, I think we'll shoot for that road over there and put the gear down. Alrighty. Well, there's some other things, I guess, to talk about with the plane in general. I'll go over those in the review here in a second, but finally got a failure, so that's absolutely fantastic. So I will see you all back here in a second for the review. Alrighty, well, you can purchase the Comanche from A2A It's about 50 bucks. Personally, I don't think it's overpriced. Sort of the general rule is that the more complex and detailed a plane is, the more expensive it becomes. And this one is fairly complex and detailed. The short version is that it looks good, it sounds good, and it's fun to fly. It's got a nice set of features and all that. I'll get a little bit more in depth in a second, but again, the short version is that it's a good one. So I'll start with the texturing and model quality. The exterior looks great. I didn't notice any gaps in the model. Everything fits together really nicely. As far as, let's say, the different configurations for the exterior, the tanks and whatnot, the things that you can equip from the tablet, everything fits together really well. I didn't notice any gaps or anything like that there either. The exterior textures are also good. It has a nice level of detail. There's some paint chips in some locations. It looks a little bit grimy, you know, it kind of looks like it's been flown and everything like that. You get 5 liveries. They all look good. Moving on to the interior, it's not really any different than the exterior modeling and texturing. Both are top-notch. As far as the interior goes, there are a lot of little things that you can interact with beyond just sort of the switches and circuit breakers and things. The one thing that I did think was funny is that you can open the ashtray, but you can't push in the cigarette lighter. And as far as the interior goes, they're the same across all of the liveries with the exception of the green Comanche, which is just a slight color variation. It's green instead of white and beige. All in all, it's a very detailed interior and exterior. As far as the sounds, A2A has made a very nice sounding aircraft here. In terms of audio quality, everything sounds crisp and clear. There is again a nice attention to detail with this one. Everything makes the sound when interacted with maybe a few exceptions, but for the main things that you're going to interact with, everything has a sound effect. Aside from all of the switches and whatnot, the engine sounds nice. There are a lot of subtle sound effects that accompany it. You spend some time with this one, you can probably fly it just by listening to it. The wind sound effects are quite good as well. Just as an example, if you don't latch the door completely, you'll know it by the increased wind sound. When you get into turbulence, you're going to hear some knocks and things like that. The same thing is going to apply when you're on the ground as well. The tires are going to make different sounds depending upon the conditions. Taking off is going to sound slightly different than landing. And let's say that you're getting a little squirrely on the runway, maybe you've gone into a full-blown slide, you're going to hear those things. The same thing applies to the grass as well, though it does sound a little bit more like driving a car down a dirt road. I could go on, but the summation of this is that it has a very rich sound set. Now, as far as how it flies, I really like how it flies. I can't really put my finger on exactly what it is I like about it, but the flight model itself has a very nice feel to it, and I think part of that comes from the visual and audio cues you get from it. The crosswinds are a lot of fun in this one. It gets bounced around a bit. The turbulence effects are rather nice. It'll shudder a bit before it stalls. Again, nice visual cues, which I think add to what give the Comanche a nice feel when flying it. Just to reiterate some of the things I mentioned earlier, it's a very well-behaved plane. It's pretty much going to do what you think it should do. In terms of speeds, it's somewhere around about 140 to 145 miles an hour, or at least that's what I seem to average in it. Now, you can adjust the severity of the turbulence if you want. There is a slider in the tablet, as well as the ability to adjust the aircraft volume from the tablet. It is independent of the Microsoft Flight Simulator options menu. So overall, it's a really nice thing to fly. It has a very good feel, which is always a weird thing to say about a video game, but it does. Moving on to the damage system. First off, it's very nice and detailed. As far as I know, anything listed in the maintenance section is something that's capable of failure. So there is quite a bit there. There's a neat bit of information about the failures themselves. When things are damaged but not destroyed, it'll say something like X is damaged, this is what's wrong with it, these are the possible outcomes of not fixing it. Some things will be rather obvious, but it's still a neat little bit of information. Again, if you don't want to deal with any of these things, if you don't want to deal with the wear and tear system, you can always go ahead and just turn it off. Now, because I'm trying to keep this under 20 minutes, I'm not going to go through all of the features, but A2A's website has a list of them. There are 27 of them. Depending upon how you want to look at it, there's probably a lot more than 27. As far as the ones that kind of stood out to me, the tablet was very nice. There are multiple configurations that you can set the aircraft up in. The tow bar and walk around were kind of neat. And then there's a whole bunch of technical stuff I'm not going to go through that I thought was really cool. Either way, everything comes together to make a quite detailed aircraft. Alrighty, well that's pretty much all I've got for today, guys. Again, the Comanche is about 50 bucks. I don't think it's overpriced. That is my opinion. I know I've said this repeatedly, but the way the visual and audio effects tie into this plane make it a really nice thing to fly. If you're looking for something that's a bit more detailed and accurate, the Comanche is something to think about. Now, I've only run into one bug while testing this plane out, and personally, I think it's absolutely hilarious. As far as the bug goes, it's fairly rare, at least in my experience, and it's not something that would have deterred me from purchasing this thing had I known about it beforehand. Either way, I did manage to record it, so it's going to come up here pretty much after I sign off. But again, that's pretty much all I've got for today, guys. So thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Back in the cockpit here. Well, I did not go very well. All right.